Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, general manager of the Minnesota Vikings, joins us now from Indianapolis and the 2025 National Football League Scouting Combine. First, how are the two children, and how's your family doing?
Thank you for asking. They're doing great. You know how it's hard when you leave now. The oldest is getting a little older, so when I leave, he's in the window waving. It's a hard thing to leave. But no, they're we all sacrifice in this business for this greater cause. But so happy the minutes I get with them. I got to make more of it. I got to figure out more time. Maybe this a little less sleep, but you don't want to miss these years. They're special to be around.
Secondly, now Demetrius Washington. All right, you're vice president of football operations. From traveling with the team and being around the facility, I've gotten to know Demetrius a little bit. But we just sat down with him and taped an interview and really got into what he does and Central Arkansas and the Masters from Missouri and your days in said, what a wonderful young man he is. What a bright future he has.
He's a unique thinker. He's one of those people when you get to know him, we sit in an office sitting back to back and, we're talking, doing our job, and then he'll just say something and you'll be like, that was unbelievable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you love that.
And just – and I really got it from our first phone call. They tell the story about when I interviewed him. It was a phone interview first, and I'm dying laughing, and I think intelligence and humor are pretty related. I don't know that there are many funny people that aren't incredibly intelligent. And so that's when I first got to know what kind of unique thinker he is. And, man, he's done such a great job. I'm proud of him, not just as my vice president, but as the first person I hired in the NFL. I'm just so happy for him. And, man, to your point, you want to build your roster. So I want him to be better than me one day as a GM. That's the point of this.
Yeah.
Because it means he's helping us with the Vikings right now.
Yeah, and it was I tried to run a bit on him. And it's abundantly clear that not only with analytics or technology that my man's watching some film too, because I'm like, Central Arkansas, okay. I went into it last night prepping for this going, there ain't going to be anybody at the combine from there. And then this David Walker, 6'1", 267, edge guy, and I'm like, all right, well, let me look at him last night. And then I watched a couple of highlights. I'm like, damn, he's good. And so then I brought it up joking with Demetrius, and he goes, edge guy, sounded like I was talking to a draft analyst. Quick twitch, edge guy, big guy, long, like, whoa.
It's what people don't realize is this is football at the end of the day. And so, yeah, that was our background. But how do you hire high-capacity people and say, hey, use your unique skill set to go watch football now and become multilingual so that you can communicate with scouts and coaches and things like that. And so we started that in San Francisco. Obviously, he's continued on that path. And so he looks at it, and you want to build a room full of people who look at things with different perspectives. And I might use different words or look at different evidence when I'm watching film, but I learn from Kevin, and I learn from coaches, and I learn from Grigson, and he learns, and we come together as a group. And by the end of it, you got a pretty good thing going. And so it's been really awesome to see him blossom and grow in that way. I wouldn't put literally any job past that guy. He's that talented and that hardworking.
And it has to be difficult when you're trying to change things, meaning you're incorporating data, you're interpreting it differently, and then you sit down and present it to a room full of other guys who have been in this league a long time, and each one of them has their own quote-unquote way of doing things, and you're sitting there saying, hey, we may need to look at this a little bit differently. I would assume that is very difficult to overcome, but you have to have, I would assume, the right people who are willing to do that, because I'm sure a lot of guys won't.
100%. And Demetrius, honestly, when we talk about our days back in San Francisco, there's times I feel like when I talk, I was joking over there. Sometimes I can't hide the nerd. It'll just come out, and in environments it doesn't need to come out. But he's so good. I don't know if it's the charm or whatever, which is talking with coaches, and he'll explain the same idea I've had, and with the coaches, and like, oh, that's all you were saying? I'll be like, yeah. And so really in San Francisco, once I realized he was so good at it, he was the one down there with coaches, with D'Amico and Kyle and Saleh, and I would be the draft meeting guy and talking about those team-building things, but he was the guy really communicating the scouting reports and different things like that. So he built that relationship from them, and in turn, he got to learn so much from coaches. Part of the reason we're so blessed to be here is because we got to learn from scouts, coaches, when we were providing them, the information that we were giving them. And so that's made it is a challenge, but really, even me when when I joke about letting the nerd out, people just know I'm well-meaning, and I'm passionate about these ideas, and they've known me long enough to, or maybe ask me to clarify or something like that. Or Kevin speaks a little bit Kwesi now, so he can understand what I'm saying and say it to the room. But Demetrius is uniquely gifted at explaining kind of complex ideas.
You're authentic, and I don't throw that around frequently. but getting to know you behind the scenes, musical proclivities we have that can be synonymous, and it's kind of like our common thread. And then the work that you're doing as a young general manager who continues to improve. But here, it's your desire to learn is unquenchable. Now that could be a double-edged sword. Sure. I mean, and not only you just said it about your son. He's looking out the window, and I feel sad, and I have to find a way to do a better job to do this. Kevin O'Connell says it a lot too after games, and I need to be better too. That's good to have, but it also can torment the bleep out of somebody too. You know what I mean?
I kind of that's man. I've just some of the thoughts, conversations I've had with my wife and family and different things like that. I would describe it as somewhat of a torment.
Yeah.
But it's that beautiful torment that somebody like me just loves. I've just always been wired to seek out that discomfort, because everything great in my life has come from that discomfort, and willing to look in a mirror and ask yourself, are you doing good enough, and keep trying, keep getting up off that mountain, and you try to achieve all your goals. But it can be that way. It can be taxing, and you need people in your life to uplift you and support you, like my wife and my mom and RG, and people who just, Kwesi, you're doing great, man. You know, and that's sometimes hard when you're just so trying to learn and trying to get better.
Right.
As you had a chance to look back on 2024 and kind of pack it up and put it away, I want to know what your highlights of last year are. I think personally the Cam Robinson move was one of my highlights, especially from your level.
Might have been a season saver.
Yeah, but what is it? What did you take away, and what are your highlights from last season?
Man, I would really just start with the offseason. As I think I said in my podium session, we had a decision to make with a player who's been really great for this franchise, a really great quarterback, and the ideas, the conversation, all those conversations, those meetings with Kev, they were just so inspiring. And to see our ideas come to fruition with detailed execution. The names on the board that showed up on free agency were names talked about 2 months ago. The quarterbacks talked about 2 years ago, from a long, dedicated process. I'm just so proud of the group, the ideas that came from it, because it's one thing to be the GM and tell people what to do. It's one thing to sit in a room and have them come to the answer, and I'll look around and be like, we're going to do this. They're a little crazy, but we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And we never blinked. I'm just so proud of that team, and just football moments. It's going to be weird to say this, but the Detroit game, the first Detroit game, where we were started with a lead, they came back and we were down. And just to see this, I'm just so proud to be a part of this team. The way they fought, Metellus punches the fumble, and Pace takes it back to the house, and the moments. I get to look at Chisholm, who I've known since college, and Demetrius and Gregson, and we're going crazy in the suite, and those will be moments I'll never forget for the rest of my life. And so that's kind of seared in my brain as a highlight moment, and even though the game didn't end up going the way.
Well, I talked to O'Connell about this a little bit, but I'm just going to be direct with it. Sam Darnold's game at Ford Field was bad. Okay, there are components that went into it, but when you watch it back, there could have been 5 touchdowns that were called. The execution was good, and he missed them. Okay, so here's the point, because Sam had an unbelievably good year, is as a leader of the organization, how do you restrain from not taking that moment, which at that moment was by far the biggest moment of the season, and canceling out a lot of good things that have been done over a long period of time?
No, it's the quintessential question, man. And if you look from a data standpoint, you try and look at the whole sample. Do you care if somebody hit 8 3-pointers in a row and then they missed their last 2? They're still 8 of 10. It's a pretty good 3-point game shooting, you know. And so I kind of linked Sam's season to that. And what you're trying to figure out is, do those 2 games mean something? They mean that he can't do something in the end. I don't believe that is such. I think that, to your point, the context around him, and that position's tough. You get to a place where you got to get going. You need something easy. And because of stuff going on around him, we didn't really get anything easy, and didn't really get the offense going. But ultimately, that's really going to be the decision. Do we think that those 2 games are really indicative or meaningful? And then really, how do we put the team around JJ, Sam, Dan, whoever is playing quarterback to be in a place to set them up to succeed in the best way possible?
Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, general manager for the Minnesota Vikings, from the Indianapolis Scouting Combine.
Well, we from a free agency standpoint, we're set to be able – we have the potential to do quite a bit. Does that change how you guys going into this offseason, or because last year's success with the free agents was second to none. going into the season, most people, the powers that be, picked us to finish last just because we had so many uncertainties. Now, those guys that you brought in all proved themselves. The whole free agent class was amazing. Now I got to do it again, right? And you have some money. You have some money to play with, so that's got to be something that keeps you going.
No,
right?
absolutely.
You got to be excited about that.
You know, when we got here, we set the plan and path, and whatever term I used for it or whatever. But part of it was to win, build the foundation, win games, compete for the playoffs while restoring cap space, while replenishing some of the players that were, you know, Ring of Honor type players that we had to replace. And it's unbelievable. You look up after 3 years, and you're like, yo, Kev, we kind of did this.
Yeah.
You know, we're in a great spot. We got some ability to improve, not just in free agency and the draft, and those are connected things. We're excited about what we know what we need to improve. And I can tell you that what I know about this organization, and when Kevin and I are in charge, that we're going to be intentional about attacking the things we need to get better at. That's not going to just be one thing. We're going to really aggressively attack it because we believe in turning, you know, potential weakness into strength, and that's how we're going to approach the offseason.
And I mean, to circle the proverbial wagons around the quarterback spot the way you guys have, holy cow. I mean, no matter what the future is for Darnold, McCarthy's supposed to be good and was good with what we saw. Daniel Jones has been good. Got a nice little turnout period there to get his mind right, kind of like Darnold had backing up Purdy with San Francisco.
Absolutely.
Which that's big. I mean, that's big to be able to turn it off for a little while, have people accept that the former first-round pick from Duke, we're going to shut him down for a little bit and let him get his mind right, and then we'll see what happens after that. You had Nick Mullins, who gave you some good moments when he had to play. Brett Rippon, too. You know, for those who watch it as closely as I do at practice, I mean, Brett Rippon looks like he can play. So the importance of having that position circled, fantastic. But wouldn't you concede the draft would be the lifeblood of teams? Free agency, in essence, would be the steroid you pump into the body to amplify and to get the most out of the body, but it may not be sustainable.
I like that. I like that
you
analogy.
know what I'm saying?
I like that analogy. I think, well, really, at the end of the day, you know, there's different ways to skin a cat, and kind of, you know, you want to be in a place where you're about talent acquisition and you're aggressive about it, however you get it. But, you know, ultimately, a lot of the lifeblood does need to come from the draft, and a lot of great players are in the draft, and if you don't draft them, you can't get them. They don't. And there's unique ways that a Jonathan Grenard even gets to free agency, because they had a young talented player on their roster already, and maybe potentially gets out. So there's a scarcity even that gets to free agency. Sometimes really unique scenarios that they get out there. So the draft is one place you can control. You get to pull the card and draft the player, and they have to come play for you. And so you always want to make sure that you're mindful of that. And obviously, these first 3 years, we've done it a lot of different ways. You know, I always joke that I want our team building to be like a Noah's Ark philosophy. There's different ways to do it where you can draft players and clear out pathways for them to play. But I believe in building a team built for the 17-game attrition of the NFL season. And so that if somebody gets hurt, I wish you would see what's behind them. And so we're not always going to necessarily have, you know, players stepping into roles day one, because that's not necessarily by our design. We want them to – the worst thing you can do to players, have him play too early and then be judged by that, and then that be a negative thing. And so we're trying to build this in such a way that players can grow and develop in the right way. But to your point, we will be about drafting really good players. And we've got a great group. Again, like I said up there, what I've seen is our draft board has gotten better, just looking back historically at the results. And all that is to see the results is execution, better execution, and then also pathways. You know, pathways to play where you're not necessarily giving people opportunity to play, but you're doing it in a way that they're at least coming as role players early and then potentially go on from there.
With McCarthy in the injury and being at the facility, let's say October, November, December, and he's getting around on that scooter and he's doing his thing. He's spending Thursdays with Kevin. I know he talked a lot to you. What do you like about him? I mean, the Raiders game, he throws a pick, bounces back beautifully. It's a preseason game, but if there was no bounce back, I'd prefer there to be a bounce back. Training camp, you know, he captured the imagination of the fan base with his gregarious nature, his mobility, his good arm, and it just seems like he's a very authentic kind of guy. Behind the scenes, what are some, in conversations with him, what are some things about J.J. McCarthy that you genuinely love that maybe the listening audience wouldn't know?
I would just start with what you said, the joy, the positivity that is authentic to him. I think you want every player, a lot of your great players to embody your culture. And joy and positivity is one of our core staples. If you talk to Kev and myself when I'm not a little under the weather, but that's just a real thing for him. When he's the joyful. One thing they talked about that preseason game was, man, this guy's having fun out there. Like after the interception, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He is playing. He is joyful playing a football game, and then also just the obsessiveness. I think there's a to your point, there's a hardness that comes with being great, with constantly chasing that next edge, and he's got it.
Yeah.
He wakes up every day trying to be the best version of himself. Man, I gave him a project to do, and the level you're talking about, the level, the standard that he puts himself to, it's unmatched. And so ultimately, that's what we're betting on: the person, the talent, and then the standard he has for himself, the love he has for his teammates, the ability to bring people along with him. We're so happy with him, and we're excited to see the future.
All right, just a couple more for the GM.
And hearing kind of the question before, the prior question before we were talking about McCarthy, it makes me see Dallas Turner's rookie year a little differently, right? And because there are some question marks out there, but you're definitely taking a prudent path with him.
Yeah.
How is he doing, and what do you expect out of him this 2025?
He's doing great, and to your point, he in our exit meetings he came, and pass rushers take time. It's one thing that people don't realize: the dark arts of trying to win in that little set point area. It's not easy, and there's some talented people like Christian Darrisaw on the other side trying to keep you from the quarterback. And so we've always known that it takes time, and partly why you want to have people in front that he can come along in the right passion. But he could see jumps. The play against Chicago where he has the sack, he came in our exit interview and talked about that week of practice, the rep that he knew that play was going to come. And that's kind of how player development happens. It's not clean. It's not always perfect. They don't always come in ready-made or different things like that. But we're excited about the future for him. The game will slow down in year two. The athletic ability that he has, that God gave him, will show up. We'll start to see more elements of his pass rush. And I also was really happy with the run game demeanor. That's a hard thing to do. Year one, show up and different run schemes. In college, maybe a little different, the open side versus the close side or whatever. But now he's seen that. He's got an off season where it's not based on combine training and different things like that. He's another year in our system, so we're excited about the arrow up for him. We expect him to impact our team.
How with Brian Flores, and he's going for head coaching jobs, and sadly for Brian, who I'm fond of, he didn't get one. But I mean, as a leader of an organization, how do you balance the emotion of that? Because in your heart you want him here, because what happened last year got good. And it's different, and it's hard to be different, specifically in an oversaturated culture and world. But you also want your friend to ascend. Yeah. How do you balance that?
I think you always lead with you want the best for people, and I just truly believe everything happens for a reason. And so for him, just like for me, when I got my first no, that wasn't just the right opportunity for me. And there was a great yes coming in the Minnesota Vikings a year later. So for him, I would pray for him that the yes will come. It'll be the right yes.
Yep.
And as long as we're together, let's do the most we can. And when you go, we'll wish you best of luck. We'll see you at the combine.
Lastly, and I brought this up with Demetrius, and I'm kind of obsessed by it. It's because so many things are changing with technology and analytics, and it is a weekly game that's emotional and it's violent, and people get to have personal problems too. That's human nature. And just putting all of that in the metaphorical jambalaya pot, and then playing the game. Now to get there, though, you're drafting. And we're seeing over the last few years so many players that started at Incarnate Word and then went to Maryland and then ended up at South Carolina. So, how deeply do you have to get into, all right, I see you got 125 here with NIL and you got 375 there, and that makes sense, okay? Yeah. But was there more to it? Right. You know what I'm saying? Right. Because you want, it's success is born of routine.
Right.
And you don't want people jumping all over the place. Yeah. If there were problems, I'm just like, the dog in front of me, I knew I was better than him. I got tired of it, so I just quit.
Right.
Well, you don't want that either.
Right.
So, that's such a new dynamic to your job. How do you handle it?
It's a tough dynamic, but it's good because it's really thinking through the what and the why. What happened and why did it happen? And, if you're an Incarnate Word, did you really have a chip on your shoulder? Do you believe that you should be playing with those big guys and you cannot wait to go up that level and show everybody what you're able to do? That's the type of guy you probably want. You want the chip on your shoulder. The guy who maybe ran from competition if there was a reason where he shouldn't have been competing, maybe that's a different story. So every story is this unique thing, and we've got great college scouts who go and tell us. And honestly, sometimes in these interviews, we ask them, "Hey, what went into that decision to go there?" We ask them straight out to tell us, and obviously that's not a perfect science because they'll shape it the way they want to.
Yeah,
but
and they're coached
well,
up.
I mean, and a lot of times it's not what they say; it's how they say it.
Agreed.
And you know when they're prepared. You know when they're giving you the whatever he and his agent wrote down the week before.
That's great. I got the kid raised by the FBI dad, Kevin, sitting next to me, so he's pretty good at
well, we're not going to draft John Gotti, okay? unless he's a blue chipper. But in not exactly knowing what a general manager does at the combine, I know there's film watching, you watch the drills and everything. I'm going to guess your favorite part and your strength are the interviews. Am I right?
Honestly, no.
Really?
I love the interviews in terms of the information gathering, just sitting there. But I try and run the room where I don't actually talk a lot. I shake their hand, bring them in the room, and let my staff do their job. Some of the best organizations I've been around, I'll name the Cleveland Guardians. I've been in meetings with Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff, and if they're with their staff, you wouldn't know that they were the most powerful people. I always look up to people like that and respect them. So I'd almost want the player to not know that I was the general manager and just getting really good questions from our group, which we talk about beforehand. So I don't really need the self-gratulation to be the one to ask them. I'm just sitting there reading body language, seeing what the things like. So I do love it from an information gathering standpoint.
Yes.
But
you're non-obvious.
Yeah, I just
you're
take
the
a back
captain
seat.
of non-obvious.
Yeah, that's what I try.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that we're not, you ain't looking for back pats.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you have to enjoy the stimulation of that moment, sitting back on a question. They set it up right to where you want to go. Bam, you come in there, you got an answer. He's either on the team or he's not.
Totally. It's great. And
That's awesome.
Obviously, I get to step in when time comes, and I can't. There's a guy tonight where I'm got to make sure that I get the snap in and feel better because I cannot wait to ask him this question. His film was really good. He's such a versatile player, and I'm just so curious to see how he sees himself.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing for me to view him a certain way, but I want to see the role that he sees in himself. Can't wait for it. Can't wait for the drills. I look forward to everything.
That's Travis Hunter, right?
Man, I was just saying
Holy
earlier.
cow, with that guy.
When you get your names early in the year, you start saying goodbye to people once you're 4-1, 5-1, whatever your record is.
Yeah.
You're like, we're not going to be picking where this guy's going. It's the problem with the NFL at times, but
good problems to have.
It's fun learning about that guy, man, and what somebody's going to get in him.
He's a talented player.
Well, if you got interviews tonight, you better go rest so you can feel well. FaceTime back to home.
I will
check that box.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you'll lay on the sword for 5 other people during the course of the day. That's just who you are from an accountability standpoint, and we really appreciate the chat.
I appreciate you, dude.
Oh, you can
Sorry, I don't want to get you sick, man.
Faith, not fear.
Oh, man.
Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, general manager of the Minnesota Vikings from the Indy Combine.